Hello, it's Professor Welch. This is a short discussion on some ideas, thoughts, and information that may be helpful for you to be successful with Programming Project 3. What are some of the tenets of Programming Project 3? Well, first, we want to read data from a data file. We want to use loops. Very importantly, we want to use arrays. Most importantly, we want to realize that we're using parallel arrays. And the important consideration for a parallel array is you have an array that in this case we'll call scores, and another array that we'll call names, and the name at each position is tied to the score at that position. For example, we're going to read in this data file here, and from this data file we will create and populate two arrays. One array will be called names, and I just made that up. The names array will be populated here, and the other array will be scores. And the scores array will be populated here from these numbers. Now, it's very important that we maintain the parallel nature of the arrays, which means Joe bowled a 198. I forgot what the scores were for, but Joe's score was 198, Ann's score was 486, Marty's score was 651. So if we move the name Marty in the array of names, we also have to move the number associated with Marty in the array of scores. So what does that mean? We have to be very considerate of the index, because the index for Marty in names will be the same as the index for 651 in scores. So let's move through this a bit. So what we want to do with Raptor is do our modular programming. And what might that look like? Well, we kind of follow. It's important that you realize how closely Project 3 follows the array video that was listed in one of the prior lessons. You need to look over that several times, and it almost solves all of Project 3. The only thing that's different is you need to consider how to handle parallel arrays and then sort the parallel arrays. But it gives a very good foundation. So the first thing that we'll do is we will add a subchart, and we'll call it load data. Now I'll complete the subchart and then come back in a second. So what we're doing is modular programming. So here's my main module. So I have start, end, and I've added two modules. The first one we've populated and we'll discuss, and the second one we'll get to in a second. So the load data, and again, this was taken directly from the example of the array video in a prior lesson. So we load the data, and what do we want to do? Well, we essentially have two arrays, and I want to populate those arrays as I read through the data file. So this is an artifact for Raptor that says an input data file is data.text, so that's what we use. And then we have a counting variable, and this is the index of your arrays. Then we have a loop, and the loop says as long as you are not at the end of your input, or as long as you're not at the end of your file, go through this process. So as long as we aren't at the end of the file, we'll go through the process. So what this does is, notice the brackets. Brackets in most programming languages indicate an array or an array manipulation. So what it does is it grabs the first item in the data.text file and puts it here in the order of the text. The data.text file is the name. So it'll take the name and put it in this part of the array, in the name array. Then it'll grab the next item in data and it'll put it in this array. It'll increment index, and let's see how this works. So you'll get a sense. I'm going to let it step through fairly slowly. So it'll jump over to load data. Now it's going to put something in name, put something in scores, increment index. It'll put something in name, put something in scores, and increment index. And I'll blow up the arrays here so you can see them. So you can notice that the value for Joe is 198. The value for Ann is 46. That's retained from the data file. So that one-to-one correspondence between the names and the numbers, or the scores, must always be retained through all of your operations. So it's iterating, and it's going to continue to take data from the data file and put it into the name array and the scores array as long as it has information in the data file. When it gets to when it ends the data file, then it'll stop. So it's done. And in a second, we'll add the print array just for purposes of being able to see the output. The important thing here is to notice that a Raptor limitation is it starts array indices at 1. And that's probably not true for almost any other programming language. They all start at 0. And that was a little bit of a concern to the students. And so this shows that there's 10 elements in the name array. There are 10 elements in the scores array, and there's a 1-to-1 correspondence. So I must always keep Joe. If I decide to sort by name, then I'm going to sort this alphabetically. And you have to do that in the programming project. Well, as I sort this alphabetically, I need to put the coding logic in to always keep the score for Joe to be 198, the score for Ann to be 486, and so on. Now I've added logic to the print array data module, or the print array data submodule, and I've done that because this loop right here, this loop style, is very important to processing an array once you have it. So it's a little bit different than reading in data from a data file. So after we read data into the array, and then we want to have some type of a module to process the array, pretty much when you have an array, whatever array it is, you'll have a loop with it to iterate through it. And then as you iterate through the loop, you'll do what the purpose of the loop is. Well, this module is to print array. So the purpose of this loop is to print the elements in the array. So take good attention to this right here. And this, again, starts off with this is the loop control variable for your array. And it says as long as the length of scores is less than index, then you'll move into this right here. So each time you iterate through here, so I think I expressed that wrong. Let me try that again. So index is going to iterate here. So when the first time that index is greater than length of scores, then we'll exit here. The logic is a little bit different than what we normally use for our procedural programming. That's why I twisted that. So again, as we go through this, index is equal to 1. So it's not true that 1 is greater than 10. So you drop down here because that's no. And then it prints the name and the actual text name, then the contents of the name array at index 1, and then it prints the text scores and the contents of the scores array at index 1. It increments index 1, so now we're at index 2. It comes up here to the loop again, and then it assesses this. And it's the same logic that we had before. That index is not greater than length of scores. Index is 2, length of scores is 10. So this is false right here, or no, and it moves down. So let's just watch this, and I've already started to run the program, and we're at the point right now where the arrays are populated up to the index 6. So let's continue, and then you'll see the results. So it's going to continue populating. Now we're at, I need to slow that down a little bit. Now we're at index 9, index 10, and then it's going to jump to the next. So now it's going to jump to the print array module, and that'll go through the loops just as we discussed. And if you look over here on the right side, you'll notice it's printing Joe and the score for Joe, Ann, the score for Ann, Marty, the score for Marty. And this doesn't do any tremendous processing. What it does is it just prints out the value of the data file to ensure that when we read it in, we read it in correctly. So I'm going to stop there, let you wrestle with the next step. And the next step is really two things. Create a sort routine and implement a sort routine. Remember, every time you do something with one element of name, you have to do the same thing with the same element, the same corresponding element at the same index for scores. So wrestle with that a bit. There's going to be some learning that happens with wrestling. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.